Now, if you're viewing the live session, you'll see a link at the top of my slides that says Ask a Question. And there's a link that starts with goo.gl/slides, and then it's /4MCGCB. So if you open up that link, either on your phone, in a separate tab, if you have a question during the actual webinar, you can ask your questions through that link. And I have a separate screen where I can see your questions pop up. There might be a minute or so delay in the video itself and for when the questions get back to me. So sit tight and be patient. Hopefully I will be able to answer your question once I see it in about a minute or two. Okay, so this is using Office 365 with the QFT, which stands for Question Formulation Technique. And just a couple of quotes to start out with. The ability to ask the right questions is probably the greatest talent one can have, from the Upright Thinkers. And this is really true in any discipline. You can certainly see how this would be true in physics, but really this can be for any student at any level. Okay, and from Warren Berger, whose book really sort of inspired this framework. Knowing the answers will help you in school. Knowing the questions will help you in life. So again, your questions shouldn't be, what do I need to know to pass a test? It should really be questions that you are wondering about and things that will really move you forward in your thinking and your knowledge. So students coming up with their own questions is really very important for them going forward in their careers and the rest of their lives. But just let's take a look at this graph for a second. So what this represents is by age, the percentage of children actively using the skill of questioning. So you can see that before they're very verbal, around 1 or 2, it's very low. And then it peaks up around age 3. And then from there until the end of their school career, questioning goes down while reading and writing go up. So obviously reading and writing are skills that really are focused on, and rightfully so, but also we need to encourage students to ask questions. And sometimes it's not as easy as saying, what questions do you have, although I say that all the time. Sometimes it has to do with teaching them how to ask the right questions. And this is a collaborative approach where students are working in groups to formulate questions related to their content in the classroom. Okay, so what is the question formulation technique? It's a simple but rigorous and step-by-step process that's designed to help students produce, improve, and strategize on how to use their questions. So we're going to take a look at 3 different kinds of thinking that are involved with the QFT. So the first kind is convergent thinking, where you're thinking of a single best answer to a defined problem. Divergent is idea analysis. So you may have multiple answers to what could be an ill-defined problem. And then what's also involved in this process is reflection or metacognition, which is thinking about your own thinking process. And in this presentation, which you have access to from the course in the online course platform, we won't go through these links right now, but there's some other video and article links that you can visit to support this. But we won't do that since this is just an hour and maybe even shy of that webinar. So these are the components of the question formulation technique. So you'll start out with a question focus, and we'll talk more about what that is. So something you want students to develop questions from. Now, before you do that, you will have to go over with students the rules for producing questions. So we'll go over what those rules are. And in a group, students would produce their questions, brainstorm questions. And then from there, different ways of categorizing their questions. Then once they do that and they think about the advantages and disadvantages of different kinds of questions, they're going to prioritize them. So think about what are their priority questions. And then students will think about how they're going to use their questions in a next step, and then reflect upon the process. What went well, what's challenging, what is helpful about this process. Okay, so here are the rules for producing questions, which you would give the students before they start. And even if it's something you're going to use all the time in your classroom, you could have the rules posted somewhere in your room. So in a given time frame, which you would give to the students, have them ask as many questions as they can. And at this point, they're not stopping to discuss. They're just generating questions, and they're not stopping to judge one another's questions that they come up with. So they shouldn't say, well, I don't think that's a good question because I really don't think that has to do with what we're talking about. At this point, they don't really talk about that. And they will either write down or type down, as we'll look at some strategies today, every question exactly as it is stated. So the person who is the recorder, the person writing down or typing, is not to rephrase it in their own mind and write it in their own way. Put it exactly as stated, unless what they said is a statement and not a question, because they should all be in the form of a question and not in the form of a statement. So they shouldn't say, wow, that's a really tall building. They could say, why is that building so tall? And then students, before they start, will think about what might be difficult about following these rules, and you could have them, if you want, discuss that amongst each other. Okay, so once they generate questions, they are going to improve their questions by categorizing. So first, you'll categorize them into closed-ended and open-ended questions. So a closed-ended question is something that can be answered with either a yes or no, or with a short one-word answer. So is this building in New York City? A yes or a no. How tall is this building? However many meters tall it is. Okay, those are closed-ended. Open-ended questions require more of an explanation. They can't be answered with a single yes or no or with one word. So a lot of questions that are why questions or how questions might be open-ended. And then they'll discuss the advantages and disadvantages of both closed-ended questions and open-ended questions, because really there are advantages and disadvantages to both. Okay, and then from there, what they're going to do is change one of the questions they marked as closed-ended into an open-ended one, and change one open-ended question into a closed-ended one. Okay, and then from there, they're going to prioritize questions. So in most cases, they'll be choosing the 3 most important questions, keeping in mind the question focus, and they'll either mark these priority questions with an X, or we'll look at what could be some different strategies or highlighting features that you could use in Office 365 tools. And then from there, they're going to share their questions with another group, and then share their priority questions, why they shared them. And then they're going to look at, in the list of questions, where their priority questions were listed. So the numbers of the priority questions. So were their priority questions more asked at the very beginning of the brainstorming? Were they asked more in the middle or the end? Or were they asked at different points? And then they'll think about how they could use their priority questions. And then they can reflect on the QFT process itself. So what is the value? What are the obstacles? How can this support your work, even if it's something they just do on their own, metacognitively? Okay, so just to get a little bit more in depth with how you would do this with students in the classroom. So students can use their questions for a number of purposes. So again, this could be something where if they need to come up with a research topic, this will help them conduct their research or write a report. Same thing with experiments. You can use this in the science classroom. Students have a phenomenon, and then they conduct experiments in their own ways based on what they think are the priority questions or the ones with the most scientific merit. And again, you always want to encourage students who are interested in something to do those independent projects. This really does help them work in groups as well. So they could also turn this into a debate format if it's something that's a controversial issue. And this will also help them prepare to give their own presentations or to go on interviews. Okay, so what is the Q focus? Okay, so the Q focus is a simple statement. It could be a picture, something visual. It could be a chart. It could be something with sound or a video. Anything to help students generate questions about a piece of curriculum content. So it's related to curriculum content and something that should be thought-provoking for students. And each time you use the QFT, you will need to design a new question focus. Because again, part of it is once you're through with the process, there may be some questions that were answered. So that's why you wouldn't want to come back to the same question focus. The idea is to have students see something fresh or hear something fresh and come up with their own questions with just that much information. And I'll just show you an example. And this is an example of a word just from my desktop on my computer. And this is Microsoft Word client. So we're going to look mainly at the documents and look at some of the benefits of that. A lot of the same tools here. And what we will do, as you can see, I have my highlight tool. Some of the benefits of using the question formulation technique document online. So back to the process. The Q focus is used to generate interest, stimulate new thinking about a topic, to introduce a topic, or set a learning agenda. So again, it could be something to kind of spark their interest. It could be something that's even part of an end of the unit, summative type. And hopefully this process will deepen student comprehension of your content. Focus itself, brief and provoke or stimulate new lines of thinking. So for example, I had just that image. That was my Q focus. The picture of Levittown was my Q focus. Text as your Q focus, that's fine, but it shouldn't be something that takes students more than a few minutes, I would say, to read. Q focus should not be a question itself. Same with videos. If it's something that's more than a few minutes long, a video is fine, but if it's too long, that's probably not the best Q focus. A whole document or an excerpt that's rather lengthy. So when you're designing your Q focus, define the purpose, think about what students will do with the questions once they produce them. Several different Q focus ideas, and then check them against the criteria we just looked at. Choose the idea that best meets your purpose and those criteria. So some tips for the Q focus. When you are first introducing this framework to your students, start with something rather simple. Again, use a new cue focus each time. And the idea is that as students get used to the process, they'll improve their better at asking questions about harder. Okay, so again, the rules for producing questions. So you let students know that soon you're going to have a question focus, but before question focus, make sure they review the rules for producing questions. So they're going to ask as many questions as they can to answer or judge. So let's say a student does know the answer to one of the questions. They're not going to stop to answer it. Someone else's question. The recorder writes down everything exactly as it is stated, and you would change any statement into a question. Maybe you want to distribute through your Office 365 the rules or post them somewhere. Okay. Review the rules, and again, reflect upon difficult about following the rules. Difficult. And try not to skip over this discussion. This is going to help the students set up what they're about to do, to work as a group, and to use those metacognitive skills. And then students will produce their questions, ideally in groups of 3 to 5. So you're going to ask one group to be the note taker, whether that's notes, writing them down on chart paper, or whether it's somebody typing them into online. Or we'll also take a look a little bit today at OneNote Class Notebook and some of the benefits of this great tool that is only available for Office 365 users. That you could do, especially if you're using technology. One student could be the timekeeper to make sure they complete their task in the given time. The taskmaster, somebody who is going to make sure they stay on task. So all those rules for producing questions, have someone, the police, to make sure students are following, and the tech guru. So if a student doesn't know how to do something within the Word doc online or the OneNote, that can be the person in the group to troubleshoot those technical issues. Now, again, it says here distribute newsprint or worksheets. We're going to look at some ways that you can either download a Word document folder. So, for example, the folder I just looked at in OneDrive, where I have documents, or using OneNote Class Notebook. So using the OneNote tool, and there's an add-in for that where then you can a page to each student. Okay. Now, if it's something where you're sharing the document with students through a link, you have a link here to a tool that you can use to create a shortened link. And this is an example of one that I have here. So it would be, the site itself is bit.ly.com. Give here is bit.ly/2fmwd. Okay, so if I click on that link then, it's going to bring me out to my much longer link. And again, students would then sign in to their Office 365 account. Is the links that you get document in Word Online, for example. Just go here. I go back to my question focus folder, and I'm just going to choose this document. And if I go to copy the link to share with my students, this really is a very long link. So for students to type that in really would not be feasible. And that's why sometimes URL shortener is useful. Okay, so again, when you go to copy a shared link, if it's something where you want to allow students to edit, let's say you create a document for each group and you're going to share it, let's say the leader of that group, then you would want to allow them to edit. Each template, you may not want to allow editing on that document. So you'd want to uncheck that then before share the document with students. Copy that link. And if you went to bit.ly.com or bit.ly, bit.ly, then that would let you link. So you're just going to paste in a long link, and then it's going to make it a shorter one. Actually, with Microsoft shared documents, they tend to have really long links. Okay, so again, we're going to produce as many questions in the allotted time. Make sure you number the questions. And the note taker should also contribute questions. Categorize them as closed or open-ended. Mark them either with O and C or with a highlighting strategy. About the advantages and disadvantages of those questions, both open-ended and closed. And ask students to practice changing questions from one type to another. So have them choose more than one, but choose at least one closed to change to open, and vice versa. And again, if students have questions of only one type, for example, only open-ended, change two of those questions to close-ended. And then they're going to choose their priority questions and then think about their rationale. Okay, so again, you can mark the priority questions with an X, strategies. Remind students to keep the Q focus in mind. And then students will talk about why they chose those three important. Okay, now this can be done either verbally or we'll take a look at some tools within the Word documents where you can actually have students adding comments onto the text as well. Students would share with another group. So you could have one group member reporting and then have other students join in and have one main reporter. I think a lot of times this works well. You might have somebody who feels really comfortable with public speaking, who can be the leader, but then maybe having first group, those students might feel more empowered to then share their input. Okay. Looking at the numbers of their priority questions, where they came from as far as when the questions were generated, the beginning, the end. Okay, and then the next steps would be, what are they going to do with their questions? Sometimes where it's a prescribed project, or you ask students to decide how they would use their questions. And that really brings us then more toward the inquiry-based learning. So then students are going to reflect on the QFT process itself. So for example, then, what is the value of learning to ask your own questions, of improving ability? Okay, and since this is a somewhat short time frame, I'm not going to show any of these videos, but these are actually some samples of teachers working with students at a variety of grade levels on this QFT process. So again, through the online course platform, you'll be able to get back to this at any time. And then also in the platform, I have a link to org. So this is the website where you can get all kinds of materials. They have a lot of Word documents that you can download and modify, graphic organizers, planning resources. You do have to sign up for the website, but it's free to sign up. So I thank the Right Question Institute. I went to a training with them about a year ago. It was great. And hopefully I'm able to bring some additional to this using technology. Okay, so now I'm going to show a couple of the strategies within Docs Online, and then show you some of the basics of OneNote and why you might want to use that. I'm going to go over to my question focus folder here. Okay, so let's say that I'm the teacher or a student and I wanted to share a document. Again, we looked at how you could get a shareable link, and you could use bit.ly to shorten that. Option is if I click share, I can share with individuals. If I don't want other people with the link to be able to edit, but I can say specific people. So I'm going to type in student. Hopefully it'll find me. Yep, that's my student, Mary. Okay. My little Warhol Dolly Parton. And then you can allow them, or I could say allow editing specific people, let's say. Okay. What I'm going to do is I have Mary here, and I'm going to send that to her. So again, if it's a link, then what would happen is students would just go to the link, and then it would bring them the document. Okay, so it's sending that, but then I Mary student view here. Okay, so now as the student Mary, or fellow student Mary, let's say, if it's a student sharing. Okay, my OneDrive is ready. All right. Okay. So now what students would do, shared with me. So again, files on your left-hand menu when you're in your OneDrive would be just your files, but the person who had a document shared with them would go to shared with me and then click here. And then from there, they would have to go in and edit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how this would look from the perspective of two people working at the same time. Go back to my teacher view here. Okay, so again, this time I'm going to click on, now which document did I share? Oh, there it is, my question focused practice. So then once they open that document, and you have two options. You can edit in Word, which would open it up, which is the client on your computer, or you can choose to edit. In this case, we're going to choose to edit in browser. I'm going to go back here, and what I'm going to do is edit in browser. And I actually have another computer open here. So I'm going to open this as another participant. Okay. So then what happens is when you see that somebody else is in the document, notice at the top now, it says Mary Kovac is also editing. Any changes that she makes way. So now if Mary wants to add a new question here, I'm just going to do that as my other. Bear with me. You'll probably see on the screen then some ghost kind of me typing. This is the other student. So I'll say that are these frogs? Again, I'm just going to pose a question. Okay. But then what I can do in this typing, I can see, and then notice the cursor is green. That's assigned to Mary at the top here. So again, we looked at some of the strategies where highlight the text here. Now I can use some highlighting strategies to mark it as closed or opened. Just change the text color as well. Options that I have. Okay. Now we're not answering questions yet, but let's say we're at the point where we're marking our priority questions. I want to mark this one as a priority question. I'm going to do that through what are called comments in the document. Okay, so first I'm just going to highlight my text, and I am going to just say that's a priority question. But now I have the option to add in comments to give my rationale for making this a priority question. So a couple of ways that I can enter in comments. I can either right-click itself and click New Comment. I can highlight it. I can go to my Insert tab at the top. Or I can also go to the Review tab and click New Comment. Now, this is actually a feature that is also available in Word, the actual Word program on your computer. You'll never even click on that Review tab to know that it's there. But it is a great tool to use. I could type comments in. Mary could answer back. I could say, this is a question because will let us know, or help us know, I should say, how these animals. Okay, so now I'm going to click Post. Okay, so now, even if I close out of the comments, if the other person doesn't have comments open, because now I'll see this little comment bubble inside. So I'm just going to click there to see the comments that are tied to that particular question. Okay. Now, if this weren't the QFT, I could certainly, well, you can always reply to the question. But also, there's an option to mark this as done. So you can use comments as sort of, you can delete comments as well. But hopefully, you won't have any students doing that to each other. There is a way that you can always, as the person who created the document, who created it, and then you shared it with the students, that you can go back into the version history for the document. So the teacher can always go back, see that. So if I go into your account here, I'm just going to go over to my 3 dots once I select it, either here, menu, okay, and I can see my version history. If a student deletes somebody else's, I can always go back to a previous version. So those are some of the strategies within a Word online document. I'll show you another tool, which is called OneNote Class Notebook. So now, as the teacher, and I should have in my list of apps here one that says Class Notebook. So two different things. You will also have a note, but Class Notebook is what allows you to, as it sounds, create a class. You would just have to add your students into your class once. I'm going to create a class notebook, which I already have. Add or remove students at any time. Okay, so let's say I want to go into my ELA period 3, and I'm going to start to type in username. Okay, and I can start to add students to the class. Now, if they're in your domain, they should pop up automatically. And if there are students you want to take out of the class, you can remove them. I'm going to add my one new student here. Okay. So the other place that you can go create class notebooks is if you do go into OneNote. You want to make sure that if you're creating a notebook this way, you click on this very last tab, which is Class Notebooks. Because you can have your own personal notebooks where you keep your own notes. Always redistribute things to students from there. But here is where you would have your class notebooks, okay? One thing that you would not want to do for a class notebook is if you're in your OneDrive and you go up to New, use OneNote notebook, this is then just going to be set up as a regular personal OneNote. So you want to make sure that if you want to set up a class notebook, that you use one of the other strategies and make sure you're in. Okay. So now as the teacher, yes. Okay. So now you can see what it does is, well, it creates the welcome page for you and kind of, gives you some background information. So there's plenty of training right when you create a OneNote. There's a lot of information to kind of get you started using advanced features of OneNote. We're only going to touch on it a little bit today. So when you create a class notebook, it automatically creates these separate sections on the left. One is a collaboration space. So again, this is where anyone, okay, so whether it's you or the students, they can all collaborate here. The content library, this is where you can share content with students. They can certainly make a copy of the content, but they can't modify anything there. See that it created a separate notebook section for each student. So what happens is a teacher, and let's say I go into the content library, I have my first question focus page here. So now if I want to add a new question focus, I could click on page, the plus page, or I can right click to add a new page line as well. Okay, so let's say I'm going to call this question focus 2, let's say. So the Microsoft Word Online computer, you have the ability, if you go to the insert menu, to insert either computer But if you don't have any saved already, you can insert online pictures. So you can search online pictures. So I do like sunflowers. Okay. Notice when you search for something, it filters it already for images that are only Creative Commons. So ones that are copyright friendly. Click on, let's see if I can find some interesting sunflowers here. Sometimes they have two heads growing out of each other. But let's say that I choose of the sunflower, click on it, and then click Insert. Okay, so then it's going to insert into that page the picture of the sunflower. Very big, but maybe that's good for this question focus. Oh, and you can see the bee on there, so maybe it's something where they have to explore. Now as a student, let me go in as a student. Go to my student account here. Now, the way students would access the OneDrive would be regular OneNote. So that's one way they can do that. They're also going to have a folder called Notebooks in their OneDrive. And teachers will have a separate file folder called Class Notebooks. They can either access their notebook at school. I can go into my class notebooks on my ELA period 3. Okay, so now you can see that there are certain things I have access to. So as a student, I can add pages into the collaboration space. The content library, I can't add a page. Notice how it's kind of grayed out. I can't add a page here. But what I can do is, if teachers posted something to that content library, make a copy of this page, my own homework section. So here's my very big sunflower. Okay, looking at all the seeds in detail. So now as a student, what I'm going to do is I can right click this one page, click copy, and click on my Mary student area here. And I'm going to paste the page into my auto-generated folders. Now again, these folders were generated by the teacher, students in one time, and then those are always there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste that page in. Now, as a student, I have my own copy of that page. Okay. So now as a student, in my text, my questions, and maybe what I want to do is home tab up here, and maybe I want to number them right off the bat. So I can say, why are there so many seeds? And then when I click enter, since I already chose numbering, it's going to be set for the next question. Oops. What is that bee doing? What is he doing on the sunflower? Okay. Here, also, if I want to share this with another student, or again, if I put it in the collaboration space, really then any student in my class would have access to that. So as the teacher, you could even have set up the groups. So I could create a page for QFT2 2 QFT2, and so on and so forth. So some different ways that you could use OneNote. What's kind of nice too in OneNote, a couple of other features there. Do my homework here. Okay. Question focus 2. And if I go up to view, so for my toolbar, I have to go to view, and I can go to page versions. So now, as the student, I also have the ability right online, I can see those page versions. Okay, so I can see that this is my version 1. So this was before questions, which restore, if I click here, allow me to then choose which version I want to keep. So then if I click back on the main one, typed in my question. So in case students are having a hard time figuring out if questions really were, and again, if they number them, it shouldn't be as much of an issue. If students seem to have questions about that, then they can always go up to view page versions in the version manager. Now, as far as commenting goes, you don't have that readily available in fortunately. Some other tools that you do have, though, I'm just going to highlight some text, a little pop-up toolbar. And there's a little check mark here to do. So I have what are called some tags. You'll see a little star and a question mark. Something as important. So I could choose the critical symbol to mark that as important. That could be how I'm marking priority questions. Other way to do that is my home tab, and I have my priority question that I want to choose selected. I can click on tags, choose the tag I want to add to it. Okay, so again, you could use the star tag, point tag to mark your priority questions. I'm just going to type another one. Is this a flower? So that I'm not going to mark as priority, let's say. A little symbol there. Some other tools that you can use that are kind of fun, especially if you wanted to add some comments in here, have the ability to go to insert and choose stickers. So this is, I mean, it's something too if you wanted to give students a grade back on their QFT. So as you notice in here, there are some pre-made ones. So I could say, my little fruit salad, good turn of phrase. And I could say, this is a great question because, so these are completely customizable. Not the pictures, but the text itself, you can add in. Done. And then it's going to add that sticker into your document. Okay, so it's inserting the picture, and it's going to have that text that you put in there. The only thing is sometimes you might want to put this actually outside of it's in, because see how it's kind of taking up some of those questions. We have this box here. Actually, outside of this area, so notice how I get a little text box here, and then I'm going to put my sticker in. And then once I have it in there, I can move it wherever I want it to be. My stickers while that's generating. Now I can click on the top here. And I move that over. And then I could just pull that near taking a minute to load here. But again, I'm on my slower connection right now. So you could then just kind of move your picture closer and then resize it. So I can click on it, and then I still have the tools, my picture format. I want that only to be 1 inch tall. I'm going to click on my picture tools in the format. Okay. So make that 1 by 1, perhaps. So you can always make your stickers smaller. But again, stickers, obviously something fun and cute, but also can be useful, a way to add comments to your document. Brings us really to the end of our time. I apologize that I had a small technical difficulty. Believe me, I was not having earlier. But as I'm sure you know, in the classroom, those things happen. So I just want to guide you to where you would find the rest of the materials in the online course platform. Okay. So again, are viewing the webinar right now, you've already been to the help videos and PD webinars. From this section, you're at using Office 365 with the QFT, which is on. So you viewed the video already, okay? And the registration link, if you haven't registered already, what will happen is I will see your results from the quiz as they come in, and then I can enter your registration. Brings up a great point, because in order to complete the quiz, there's a secret word that you're going to need to enter. So I'm just going to put it on the screen here. Not that it's, okay. All lowercase, it's just the word inquiry. So I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so the secret code for the video you have to enter into the quiz is inquiry. And in order to submit it, you'll have to enter that. Okay, so the quiz is linked right here to here. Code. And then it's a 5-question quiz. If you get 80% or better, right off the bat, you get your certificate automatically mailed to you. If you aren't successful the first time, you can take it as many times as you would like to, okay? And then also, the resources from today are in that module as well. So the link right out to a link to the webinar slides. And if you're viewing this webinar after the fact, I have a separate discussion area, questions. So that if you wanted to ask me a question later on, thread, and then post your question, and I'll get back to you. Usually I'll check the platform about every day, if not every other day.